Good morning, it's July 12th, and this is To My Liberal Friends. The Republicans running for the presidency has grown to a significant number. Here's the list at this moment, and I suspect it might grow in the next couple of months. We have Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina and ambassador to UN under Trump. Vivek Ramaswamy, a young former tech and finance CEO. Asa Hutchinson, former congressman and former governor of Arkansas. Tim Scott, the current senator from South Carolina. Ron DeSantis, former congressman and current governor of Florida. Mike Pence, former congressman and the vice president of the United States under Donald Trump. We have Chris Christie, the former governor of New York. Doug Burgum, current governor of North Dakota. Francis Suarez, the mayor of Miami. Will Hurd, a former CIA agent and former congressman from Texas. And then Donald Trump, the former president of the United States. And I say the field might grow because several others have hinted at running, to include Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, John Bolton, that would be a long shot, former national security advisor, and even Liz Cheney, the anti-Trump former congresswoman from Wyoming who lost her seat. And that's a pretty hefty field, and in some ways shows the depth of the bench in the Republican Party. But it also causes some major problems for the Republicans in 2024. In my opinion, the large field favors Donald Trump. He seems to have an ironclad grip on about 35% of the primary voters, and they'll support him no matter how outrageous he acts. Donald Trump is the epiphany of the spoiled child. He flies into a rage at anyone that dares to challenge him or not endorse him. This past week, he turned his ire on Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds because she had chosen to remain neutral in the race. In Trump's twisted mind, everyone has to endorse him and all other candidates should resign the race. He's awaiting a coronation instead of a primary race. He fails to acknowledge that Governor Reynolds, like other top Republicans in Iowa, have pledged to remain neutral and not to endorse any candidate ahead of the First Nation caucuses. They made this decision to ensure that all candidates have an even playing field, and no other candidate has criticized them for being neutral. But Donald Trump had to pout like a spoiled child he is and say, quote, "I don't invite her to events," end quote. Perhaps Governor Reynolds should tell Trump that he's not invited to participate in the Iowa caucus system. But this has been Trump's modus operandi from the beginning. He calls his opponents petty names and questions their loyalty, all the while making it clear that he will only support himself. This week, Jason Miller, a longtime advisor to Donald Trump, said the former president was unlikely to participate in at least the first two Republican presidential primary debates, but said the former president still has not made his final decision on the matter. Think about that for a minute, all you Trump supporters. He won't debate and he won't commit to supporting any candidate that might defeat him for the nomination. Now, I hear the term rhino bandied about all the time, and I don't like the term, but it applies to anyone in the 2024 race that is Donald Trump. He is not a true Republican. He is interested only in himself, and he could win as a Democrat, he'd switch in a New York minute. Years ago, Ronald Reagan said the 11th commandment was, quote, "Thou shalt not speak ill of another Republican," end quote. But apparently that does not apply to Donald Trump. Again, to you Trump supporters, do you hear anything the other candidates attacking each other personally? They've been forced to attack Trump because he does, not now or ever, act in a civil manner. I want you to think about Reagan's comment for a minute. Reagan had a broad vision of what he expected of the Republican Party. The 1964 presidential contest had left the Republicans more divided than they'd been in decades. The party's liberal and moderate wing, supporters of Nelson Rockefeller, blamed conservatives for Barry Goldwater's disastrous defeat, in which Lyndon Johnson won more than 480 electoral votes as Democrats took two-thirds majorities in both houses of Congress. Reagan had already fixed his eyes on the White House, and he knew he couldn't get there leading a fractured party. We need to unify the Republican Party, not divide it. Republicans long for the days of Reagan, and well they should, for he was the party's last hero, their last real vote getter. But they're not going to see another Reagan until they revive their 11th commandment and stop beating up on one another. Until then, the Republican Party will look less like Reagan's GOP than like the Democrats of Will Rogers' day, where he said, I don't belong to an organization that's organized, I belong to the Democratic Party. Well, Trump does not get this and never will because he is an egotistical fool who is only interested in one person, Donald Trump. It's been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, hit the subscribe button.